My husband Asher left me alone during my third round of chemotherapy for a golf tournament, texted that I was being overly dramatic about some nausea, and when I collapsed from severe dehydration at the treatment center, the oncology nurse handed me an envelope saying, "A woman named Kendall told me to give you this if he didn't show up." The fluorescent lights of the chemotherapy infusion center buzzed overhead as I sat in chair number 7, the same chair I'd occupied every 2 weeks for the past month and a half. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The IV needle felt like ice in my arm as the adriamycin dripped slowly into my bloodstream, each drop carrying both hope and poison through my veins. I'd named this cocktail of chemicals liquid fire because that's exactly what it felt like as it coursed through my body, burning away cancer cells and healthy ones alike. My name is Mira Baltimore, and 6 weeks ago I was a completely different woman. 6 weeks ago I was a 34-year-old marketing director who thought her biggest problem was deciding between the salmon or chicken at client dinners. 6 weeks ago I believed my husband Asher Baltimore loved me unconditionally, the way he'd promised when he slipped that platinum band on my finger 3 years earlier in the gardens of the Miranda State. 6 weeks ago I didn't know what triple-negative breast cancer meant, or that those 3 words would become the dividing line between my old life and whatever this new existence was becoming. The diagnosis had come on a Tuesday morning that started like any other: coffee with hazelnut creamer, NPR on the radio, Asher scrolling through his phone while eating steel-cut oats, planning his day around the Myers construction account that had been consuming his attention for months. I'd found the lump the night before while showering, a hard little pearl beneath my left breast that definitely hadn't been there a week earlier. "It's probably nothing," Asher had said without looking up from his screen. "Women find lumps all the time. Stress does weird things to the body, and you've been working too hard on the Richmond campaign." But it wasn't nothing. The mammogram led to an ultrasound, which led to a biopsy, which led to Dr. Sarah Chen sitting across from me in her pristine white coat, speaking words that seemed to echo from another dimension. "Invasive ductal carcinoma, stage 2A, triple-negative subtype. We need to start chemotherapy immediately." Asher had been late to that appointment too, rushing in 15 minutes after Dr. Chen finished explaining my treatment protocol. "Sorry, babe," he'd whispered, sliding into the chair beside me. The Myers presentation ran long. What did I miss? What he'd missed was our entire life changing in the span of 23 minutes. Now, sitting in this chair with poison flowing through my veins and my scalp tingling from hair that was already beginning to loosen, I stared at my phone screen, reading the text message Asher had sent 2 hours earlier. "Can't make it today. Annual golf tournament with the Myers brothers. You know how important this account is. You'll be fine. It's just sitting there for a few hours. Text me when you're done." Just sitting there for a few hours. As if chemotherapy was equivalent to getting a manicure. As if the nausea that had me retching into our toilet at 3 a.m. wasn't real. As if the bone-deep exhaustion that left me unable to climb our stairs without stopping halfway wasn't valid. As if watching clumps of my hair circle the shower drain every morning was something I should handle alone with a cheerful smile. The woman in the chair beside me, Cadence Miranda, was also on her 3rd round. We'd become infusion buddies, bonding over the shared experience of feeling like aliens in our own bodies. Her husband Luke had driven her here today, just like he had for every single treatment. He sat in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, reading aloud from a mystery novel she loved, occasionally pausing to offer her ice chips or adjust her blanket. "Where's Asher today?" Cadence asked, her voice hoarse from the anti-nausea medications. "Golf tournament," I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Important client." Cadence and Luke exchanged a look that lasted exactly 3 seconds, but in those 3 seconds I saw something that made my chest tighten with embarrassment, pity, understanding, recognition of something I wasn't ready to acknowledge yet. "The Myers account is really demanding," I added quickly, hating how defensive I sounded. "He's been working on landing this contract for over a year. It could change everything for his firm." Luke nodded politely, but his expression remained carefully neutral. "That's tough timing," he said gently. "These treatments can be pretty rough." Pretty rough, the understatement of the century. As if summoned by my spiraling thoughts, the nausea hit like a freight train. One moment I was fine, the next I was doubled over, dry heaving into the pink basin the nurse had thoughtfully placed beside my chair. My entire body convulsed as waves of sickness rolled through me, and somewhere in the fog of misery, I heard the concerned voices of medical staff. "Mira, honey, how are you feeling?" Nancy, my regular nurse, was suddenly beside me, checking my IV line and pulse. "When did you last eat something?" "This morning," I gasped between heaves. "Toast, half a piece. And fluids." I tried to remember. Coffee at breakfast, but then nothing because Osher had used the last of the electrolyte drinks I'd been relying on, and I'd been too exhausted to go to the store. "Not much," I admitted. Nancy's expression grew concerned. "Your blood pressure is dropping, sweetheart. I think you're dehydrated. We need to get some fluids in you and monitor you more closely." The next hour passed in a blur of additional IV bags, frequent vital sign checks, and the growing realization that this wasn't a normal reaction. My body was struggling more than usual, fighting the poison and the dehydration simultaneously. Other patients and their companions cast worried glances in my direction as Nancy called for Dr. Chen. "Mira, I'm concerned about your hydration levels and your overall response today," Dr. Chen said after examining me. "Your white cell count from yesterday's labs was already borderline low, and this level of dehydration could complicate your treatment. Is there someone who can stay with you for the next 24-48 hours? Monitor your fluid intake and make sure you're eating regularly?" I thought about Asher on the golf course, probably laughing with the Myers brothers over expensive whiskey, celebrating whatever deal they were cementing. "My husband will be home tonight," I said weakly. "Make sure he understands how serious this is. Dehydration during chemo isn't just uncomfortable, it can be dangerous." As Dr. Chen walked away, Nancy lingered beside my chair. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and 30 years of oncology experience written in the gentle lines around her mouth. "Mira," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure we had privacy. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." I nodded, though the movement made my head spin. "Do you have adequate support at home? Someone who can help you through this treatment?" The question hit harder than the nausea had. "Of course," I said automatically. "My husband is very supportive." Nancy studied my face for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope with my name written across the front in elegant handwriting. "A woman came by earlier today. She said her name was Kendall, and she asked me to give you this if your husband didn't show up for your treatment." My heart stopped. "What woman? I don't know anyone named Kendall." "She seemed to know you, though. Or at least, she seemed to know your situation." Nancy placed the envelope in my trembling hands. "She paid for your parking today, and she left specific instructions that I should only give this to you if you were here alone." I stared at the envelope, my name written in script so beautiful it looked like calligraphy. Beneath my name, someone had written in smaller text, "For when you're ready to fight back." "Did she say anything else?" I whispered. Nancy glanced around again, then leaned closer. "She said to tell you that you're stronger than you think, and that some battles require allies you never knew you had." The envelope felt substantial in my hands, as if it contained more than just paper. Through the fog of medication and confusion, one thought crystallized with startling clarity. Someone was watching. Someone knew that Asher had abandoned me here, and somehow that someone had anticipated this exact moment. As the afternoon sun slanted through the treatment center windows, casting long shadows across the sterile floor, I realized that my fight wasn't just against the cancer anymore. There was something else happening here, something that went far beyond missing golf tournaments and thoughtless text messages. The woman who had entered this chair 3 hours ago, the woman who made excuses for her husband's absence and apologized for his priorities, was about to discover just how much she didn't know about the man she'd married. And somewhere in this building, a stranger named Kendall had just lit the fuse that would burn down everything I thought I understood about my life. The envelope remained unopened in my purse during the 40-minute Uber ride home, its presence burning like a secret I wasn't ready to confront. The driver, a kind older man named Art, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror with concern as I leaned my head against the cool window, fighting waves of nausea that the additional IV fluids hadn't completely eliminated. "You okay back there, miss?" he asked as we pulled into the driveway of our colonial-style house in the Riverside district. "You need me to help you to the door?" I managed a weak smile. "I'm fine, thank you, just tired." But I wasn't fine, and as I fumbled with my keys at the front door, I realized I hadn't been fine for weeks. The realization wasn't about the cancer. I'd been fighting that battle with everything I had. No, this was about something else entirely, something I'd been too scared, or too loyal, or too stubborn to acknowledge. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The house felt tomb-like in its silence. No concerned husband rushing to greet me, no flowers on the kitchen counter, no note asking how the treatment went, just the lingering scent of Asher's expensive cologne and a coffee mug left carelessly on the granite island, a ring of brown staining the pristine surface I'd cleaned that morning despite feeling like death. I sank onto our white leather couch, the one Asher had insisted on despite my protests that it wasn't practical, and finally allowed myself to think about what Nancy had asked me. Did I have adequate support at home? The honest answer was devastating. 3 weeks ago, when I'd first started losing my hair, I'd found Asher in our bedroom, staring at the clumps scattered across my pillowcase with an expression of barely concealed disgust. When he noticed me watching him, he'd quickly rearranged his features into something resembling sympathy. Maybe you should start wearing those scarves, he'd suggested. The ones Dr. Chen mentioned. It might be easier for both of us. Easier for both of us, as if my hair falling out was somehow an inconvenience I was inflicting on him. 2 weeks ago, during my second treatment, he'd promised to drive me home afterward. I'd waited in the treatment center lobby for an hour and a half before finally calling him. "Shit, Mira, I'm so sorry," he'd said, and I could hear the sounds of a restaurant in the background, clinking glasses, laughter, the unmistakable buzz of a business dinner. "The Myers meeting is running way longer than expected. Can you catch an Uber? I'll pay you back." He'd never paid me back. Last week, when the nausea had been particularly brutal and I'd spent most of the day curled up in our guest bathroom, Asher had actually seemed annoyed when he came home to find dinner not prepared. "I know you're going through a tough time," he'd said, loosening his tie with the air of a man whose patience was being tested, "but life can't just stop, you know? I've been working 14-hour days trying to close this deal, and it would be nice to come home to some normalcy." Normalcy. He wanted normalcy while I was literally fighting for my life. But it wasn't just the cancer-related incidents. As I sat in that pristine living room surrounded by furniture Asher had chosen and art Asher had bought and a life Asher had designed, I started remembering other moments. Earlier moments, patterns I'd been willfully blind to. Last Christmas, when I'd come down with pneumonia and had to miss his company's holiday party, the one where spouses were expected to smile and charm clients, Asher had gone alone and spent the entire evening texting me updates about how much more fun everyone else's wives were having at their celebrations. 2 years ago, when my father had his heart attack and I'd flown to Oregon to be with my family, Asher had called me daily to complain about having to handle household responsibilities. "I'm not built for this domestic stuff, Mira," he'd said while my father was literally in cardiac ICU. "When are you coming home?" Our wedding day. Even our wedding day hadn't been exempt. I'd gotten food poisoning the morning of the ceremony, probably from the sushi we'd had at the rehearsal dinner, and while I was vomiting in the bridal suite, Asher had sent his groomsman Sheldon to check on me with a message. "Asher wants to know if you're going to be able to pull it together for the ceremony. There are 200 people waiting." Pull it together, as if severe food poisoning was a choice I was making to inconvenience him. My phone buzzed with a text from Asher. "How did treatment go? Hope you're feeling better. Still at the tournament, but should be home by dinner. Can you grab some groceries? We're out of pretty much everything." I stared at the message, reading it 3 times. No questions about my health. No acknowledgement that I'd been left alone during a medical crisis. No apology for missing what Dr. Chen had specifically told us both was a crucial treatment. Just a casual assumption that I would somehow summon the energy to grocery shop after spending 5 hours having poison pumped into my veins. But the most telling part was the timing of his text. He was checking in now, at 4:30 p.m., exactly when he knew my treatment would be over. Not during the treatment to see how I was handling it, not earlier to wish me luck or send encouragement, only after, when his obligation to show concern was safely minimal. I thought about Cadence and Luke, how he'd rearranged his entire work schedule around her treatments, how he'd researched every side effect and prepared their house with comfort items, how he'd held her hand during the hard parts and celebrated the small victories, how he'd shaved his own head in solidarity when her hair started falling out. The contrast was so stark it physically hurt. My mother's voice echoed in my memory from a conversation we'd had 6 months before the diagnosis. She'd been visiting for my birthday, and she'd watched Asher interact with me for 3 days before pulling me aside. "Honey," she'd said carefully, "I love you and I want you to be happy. But I need to ask you something and I want you to really think about your answer. Does Asher make you feel cherished?" I'd bristled at the question then, defensive of my marriage and my choices. "Of course he does, Mom. He's just focused on his career right now. Once the firm takes off, things will be different." But sitting in our sterile, perfect living room, I realized my mother hadn't been asking about Asher's career ambitions. She'd been asking about something fundamental, something I'd been making excuses for since the day I met him. The envelope in my purse seemed to pulse with possibility. Someone named Kendall knew something I didn't. Someone had been watching, had anticipated this exact moment of realization, and had prepared for it. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than exhaustion and nausea. I felt curiosity. And underneath that, like a small flame just beginning to catch, I felt something that might have been anger. The woman who had made excuses for Asher's selfishness was sitting on this couch, but she was about to stand up and walk into the kitchen to read an envelope that would change everything. And for the first time in our entire relationship, Asher Baltimore wasn't going to be the one controlling what happened next. I carried the envelope to our kitchen island, the same granite surface where Asher had carelessly left his coffee ring that morning. My hands trembled as I broke the elegant wax seal, actual wax, pressed with what looked like a small rose. Even in my weakened state, I noticed the attention to detail, the formality of it all. This wasn't some random note. This was deliberate, planned, important. Inside was a single photograph and a folded letter written on heavy cream paper. The photograph made my breath catch in my throat. It was Asher, but not the Asher I knew. This version was younger, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, wearing a navy suit I'd never seen. He was smiling that devastating smile that had first attracted me to him at the Morrison & Associates networking event where we'd met, but his arm was around a woman who definitely wasn't me. She was beautiful, auburn hair swept into an elegant updo, wearing a dusty rose bridesmaid dress that complemented her pale skin perfectly, but it wasn't her beauty that made my heart race. It was the way Asher was looking at her. The expression on his face was one I'd seen maybe 3 times in our entire relationship, and never recently. It was adoration, pure, uncomplicated devotion. I flipped the photo over. Written in the same elegant script as the envelope was, Asher and Kimberly Baltimore, June 15, 2019, Miranda Estate Gardens, Baltimore. The same last name he'd given me when we married, the same estate where we'd had our wedding reception 2 years later. My vision blurred, and for a moment I thought it was another chemo side effect. Then I realized I was crying, not the gentle tears of sadness, but the hot, angry tears that come when your entire reality tilts sideways. I unfolded the letter with shaking fingers. Dear Mira, if you're reading this, it means Asher has done to you what he did to me, abandoned you when you needed him most. My name is Kimberly Myers, and I was married to your husband for 4 years before you ever met him. I know you're confused. I know you're probably telling yourself this is some kind of mistake or cruel joke. I thought the same thing when I first realized what kind of man I'd married. But you're not crazy, and you're not overreacting. You're just finally seeing clearly. I know about the golf tournaments that mysteriously align with your treatment days. I know about the business dinners that run late whenever you're feeling sickest. I know about the way he makes you feel guilty for needing support during the hardest fight of your life. I know because I lived it too. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. Asher's response was remarkably similar to what you're experiencing now. The first few weeks, he played the concerned husband role perfectly, at least when other people were watching. But when it came to the day-to-day reality of living with someone fighting cancer, he disappeared into his work, his hobbies, his carefully constructed excuses. The Myers construction account you've heard so much about? That's my family's business. My father started it 40 years ago, and my brother Sheldon runs it now. Asher didn't just marry me, he married into a multi-million-dollar construction empire. When I got sick, he saw an opportunity, not a crisis. I had to stop reading. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the paper. Sheldon Myers. I knew that name. He'd been one of Asher's groomsmen at our wedding. A close friend, Asher had said. Someone he'd known for years. Someone who was Kimberly's brother. The nausea hit me again, but this time it had nothing to do with chemotherapy. I rushed to our powder room and dry-heaved into the pristine white toilet, my mind racing with implications I wasn't ready to process. When I returned to the kitchen, the letter was still there, waiting. I forced myself to continue reading. The treatment center where you receive your chemotherapy used to be mine too. Same chair, number 7. I requested it specifically when I set this up. I wanted to make sure Nancy would be your nurse. She was mine too, and she's the one person who understood how completely alone I was during my fight. Nancy has been watching for you, Mira. When Asher married you, she recognized the patterns immediately. She's been documenting every treatment he's missed, every excuse he's made, every moment he's left you to fight alone. She's also been in contact with me. I survived my cancer, in case you're wondering. I beat it completely. But I didn't survive my marriage to Asher Baltimore. The man you think you know has a very specific pattern with sick wives, and you need to understand what's coming before it's too late. Right now, while you're reading this, Asher isn't at a golf tournament. He's at the Morrison & Associates quarterly retreat in Hilton Head, the same company where you work. He's there with someone you know, someone who's been watching your marriage dissolve and positioning herself as his next victim. Someone who sees your cancer as an opportunity to move in on what she thinks is an unhappy husband ready for a change. My phone started ringing. Asher's ringtone, Celebration by Kool and the Gang, a song that now seemed obscenely inappropriate. I let it go to voicemail, my eyes scanning the letter frantically. Check his location if he's sharing it with you. Cross-reference it with the Morrison retreat schedule you probably helped organize before you got sick. Then check his credit card statements from the past month. Look for charges at places you've never been, restaurants you've never discussed, hotels you've never booked. But most importantly, Mira, check your joint accounts. Check them right now while you're alone and can process what you find without him watching your reaction. My laptop was upstairs in our bedroom, but my phone would work just as well. With trembling fingers, I logged into our online banking. The checking account looked normal, routine bills, grocery stores, gas stations, but our savings account, the one we'd been building toward buying a larger house, the one that had contained $47,000 last time I checked. $35,000 had vanished in the past 6 weeks, exactly the same 6 weeks I'd been in chemotherapy. I scrolled through the transaction history, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Hotel charges in Hilton Head, restaurants I'd never heard of, a jewelry store purchase for $3,400 on the same day I'd been in the hospital overnight for severe dehydration. The phone rang again. This time I answered. Mira, thank God, Asher's voice was slightly breathless as if he'd been running. I've been trying to reach you. How are you feeling? How did treatment go? In the background I could hear ocean waves, and something else, a woman's laughter, quickly muffled. Where are you, Asher? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. I told you, sweetheart. The Myers tournament. We're at the clubhouse now, celebrating. Sheldon finally agreed to expand the partnership with our firm. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly, so naturally, that I almost believed it despite the evidence in front of me. That's wonderful, I said. I'm so proud of you. Are you okay? You sound strange. Just tired. The treatment was harder today. Dr. Chen said I need someone to monitor me closely for the next day or two. Of course, babe. I'll be home soon and we'll order your favorite Thai food. Just rest until I get there. What time should I expect you? A pause. Probably around 9, maybe 10. The celebration is going pretty late. It was 5:30 p.m. The woman whose laughter I'd heard was planning to spend the next 4 hours with my husband while I recovered from chemotherapy alone. I love you, I said, and meant it, because I was saying goodbye to the man I thought he was. Love you too, Mira. Feel better. After I hung up, I finished reading Kimberly's letter. The final paragraph made my blood run cold. Asher didn't just abandon me during cancer treatment, Mira. He actively tried to speed up the process. What I'm about to tell you will be hard to believe, but I have proof. And more importantly, I have a plan to make sure he never does this to another woman again. If you're ready to fight back, meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the Riverside Botanical Gardens near the Rose Maze. Come alone, trust no one else with this information until we've talked. You're stronger than you know, and you're not fighting alone anymore. Kimberly. The house suddenly felt impossibly large and empty around me, but for the first time since my diagnosis, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. I spent the next hour doing something I'd never done in 3 years of marriage. I investigated my own husband. What I found was a masterclass in deception so thorough, so calculated that it took my breath away. His location services, which he'd always claimed were turned off for privacy reasons, told a very different story when I checked our shared Apple account. He wasn't at any golf course. He was at the Ocean Breeze Resort in Hilton Head, the exact same resort where Morrison and Associates held their quarterly retreat. The same retreat I'd helped plan before my diagnosis. The same retreat I'd had to miss because it fell on my treatment week. I pulled up the Morrison Company calendar on my laptop. I still had administrative access since I was technically just on medical leave, not terminated. There it was, Executive Retreat, Ocean Breeze Resort, September 15-17. Today was September 16th. My hands moved across the keyboard with surgical precision, muscle memory from years of investigating clients and competitors in my marketing role. I cross-referenced the hotel charges on our credit card with the resort's restaurant menus, finding exact matches. Dinner at their signature steakhouse last night, $247. Lunch at their poolside grill today, but it was the jewelry store charge that made me physically ill. Cartier, downtown Charleston, the same day I'd been hospitalized for dehydration. I called the store using my sweetest voice and claiming to be Asher's assistant following up on a recent purchase. "Oh yes, Mr. Baltimore," the sales associate gushed. The tennis bracelet was absolutely gorgeous. His girlfriend was thrilled with it. Such a romantic gesture, buying it while she waited in the car. Girlfriend. While I was in the hospital fighting for my life, Asher had been buying jewelry for another woman. I called Morrison and Associates next, asking to speak with my assistant, Rebecca, who'd been covering my accounts. "Mira, how are you feeling? We've all been thinking about you." Rebecca's genuine warmth was a stark contrast to my husband's calculated coldness. "Better, thank you. Listen, I'm trying to track down some files from the retreat planning. Who all attended this quarter?" "Oh, the usual executive team plus their guests. Actually, it was nice to see some of the junior staff get invited this time. Cadence from accounting went, and that new girl from legal, Kendall Myers." My blood turned to ice. "Kendall Myers. Yeah, she just started last month. Gorgeous girl. Really sharp. I think Asher recommended her for the invite, said she was doing excellent work on the Myers construction integration." The integration, of course. Asher wasn't just cheating on me. He was using his affair to cement the business relationship that had become his obsession. And the woman he was doing it with shared a name with the woman who'd written me the letter. "Rebecca, what does Kendall look like? Tall, blonde, probably late 20s? Why? Just curious. I think I might have met her at the company picnic." After I hung up, I sat in our kitchen, staring at the evidence spread across the granite island like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too trusting to assemble. Credit card statements showing a double life, location data proving deliberate lies, a jewelry purchase made while I was hospitalized. And now, a name that connected everything. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mira, this is Kendall Myers. We need to talk before you meet my sister tomorrow. Can you come to the treatment center tonight at 8 p.m.? Nancy will be there. It's not safe to discuss this anywhere else." Sister. Kimberly Myers had a sister named Kendall, who worked at my company and was apparently having an affair with my husband. The web of deception was so intricate, so carefully planned, that I felt like I was living in someone else's nightmare. But even as the betrayal cut through me like a physical wound, I felt something else rising. A cold, analytical fury that reminded me why I'd been so successful in marketing. I understood strategy. I understood long-term planning. And I was beginning to understand that whatever was happening here went far beyond a simple affair. At 7:45 p.m., I drove to the cancer center, my hands steady on the wheel despite the storm raging in my chest. The building was mostly dark except for security lighting, but Nancy met me at the staff entrance, her face grave with concern. "Mira, honey, how are you feeling after today?" "Like my entire life has been a lie," I said honestly. She led me through empty corridors to a small conference room where a tall, blonde woman in her late 20s was waiting. Even in the harsh fluorescent lighting, she was stunning, the kind of effortless beauty that made heads turn. But her eyes held an intelligence that was almost predatory. "You must be Mira," she said, standing to shake my hand. "I'm Kendall Myers. You're sleeping with my husband." She didn't flinch. "Yes, I am. And before you decide whether to slap me or scream at me, you need to understand why." Nancy closed the door and activated a small white noise machine. "What we discuss here doesn't leave this room," she said firmly. "Kendall, show her the files." Kendall opened a laptop and turned it toward me. The screen showed a detailed spreadsheet with dates, locations, expenses, and names. "This is every affair Asher Baltimore has had in the past 7 years," she said. 3 wives, 14 mistresses, and a pattern of behavior that would make a clinical psychologist sick. The spreadsheet was color-coded: red for married women he'd targeted during their medical crises, yellow for single women he'd used to advance business relationships, green for brief encounters that meant nothing. I was listed under red. Wife 2-3, Mira, Baltimore. Cancer diagnosis 8-1. Affair initiation 8-15. Abandonment pattern confirmed 9-10. Wife number 3, I whispered. Kimberly was wife number 2, Kendall said gently. Before her was a woman named Sarah Chen. Yes, the same last name as your oncologist. Dr. Chen is Sarah's sister-in-law. Asher has a very specific type: successful, independent women who own property or have family money. Women who become vulnerable during medical crises. Nancy leaned forward. Sarah had a brain aneurysm. Same pattern. Asher became increasingly absent during her recovery, had an affair with a business contact, and tried to manipulate her into signing over her assets while she was still cognitively impaired from the surgery. Tried. Sarah's family intervened, Kendall said, but not before Asher had drained most of their joint accounts and transferred ownership of her graphic design business to himself. She spent 2 years in legal battles getting it back. I stared at the spreadsheet, seeing my own life reduced to data points and timelines. How do you know all this? Because my family hired a private investigator to track Asher's pattern after what he did to Kimberly, Kendall said. We've been building a case against him for 2 years. When he started working at Morrison & Associates and we learned he'd married again, we knew we had to act. So you got yourself hired at my company? I got myself hired, positioned myself as his type, and let him think he was seducing me. Every conversation we've had has been recorded. Every financial transaction has been documented. Every lie he's told you, he's also told me, about how sick you are, how burdensome you've become, how he wishes he could start over with someone who understands him. Nancy handed me a tissue as tears I didn't know I was crying dripped onto the conference table. Mira, there's something else you need to know. Based on the timeline, we believe Asher is planning to escalate things soon. What do you mean? Kendall's expression grew dark. Sarah's aneurysm was natural. Kimberly's cancer was natural. But Asher has been researching ways to complicate cancer treatment, make it more difficult for patients to recover. The room spun around me. You think he's trying to kill me? We think he's trying to position himself as a grieving widower with access to your assets and no inconvenient ex-wife to deal with, Kendall said. The question is, are you ready to stop him? For the first time in months, I felt my marketing brain kick into high gear. This wasn't just about revenge or justice. This was about survival. And more than that, it was about making sure Asher Baltimore never had the chance to target another vulnerable woman again. What do you need me to do? I asked. Kendall smiled, and I finally understood why Asher had been so easily manipulated. When she wanted to be, Kendall Myers was absolutely terrifying. We need you to stay alive long enough to destroy him, she said. Think you can handle that? I drove home from the cancer center in a state of eerie calm that surprised me. The woman who had entered that conference room was the same one who had spent 3 years making excuses for Asher's behavior, who had apologized for needing support during chemotherapy, who had convinced herself that love meant accepting crumbs of attention. The woman leaving that building was someone entirely different. As I pulled into our driveway at 9:30 p.m., I saw Asher's BMW already parked in the garage. He was home early from his fictional golf tournament, probably to maintain the illusion of being a caring husband. The house glowed with warm light from every window. He'd turned on every lamp and overhead fixture, creating the appearance of a welcoming home for his sick wife. I sat in my car for a moment, studying the house we'd bought together 2 years ago, the house I'd fallen in love with for its character and charm, the house Asher had immediately wanted to renovate into something more impressive. Looking at it now, I could see his influence everywhere: the perfectly manicured lawn that required expensive maintenance, the imported stone walkway that had cost more than my car, the security system that was more about status than actual protection. Even our home had been designed to serve his image. I found him in the kitchen, takeout containers from my favorite Thai restaurant arranged on our dining table. He'd lit candles, the expensive ones I saved for special occasions, and opened a bottle of wine. The scene was perfectly staged, like a movie set designed to convey loving husband cares for sick wife. "There's my brave girl," he said, crossing to embrace me. His hug felt different now that I knew where his hands had been, who else he'd held today. "How are you feeling? You look tired." "Much better, actually," I said, and meant it. "Dr. Chen said today's treatment went really well." That's wonderful, sweetheart. I ordered all your favorites: pad thai, spring rolls, that coconut soup you love. He guided me to the table with theatrical gentleness. Tell me about your day. I want to hear everything. I almost laughed at the performance. How was your golf tournament? Did you and Sheldon Myers have a good time? Fantastic. We finally closed the partnership expansion. He poured wine into my glass, the picture of celebration. This deal is going to change everything for us, Mira. Financial security, bigger clients, maybe even that house in the mountains you've been dreaming about. The house in the mountains. I'd mentioned it once, 8 months ago, after seeing a real estate listing. I'd been surprised he remembered, but now I understood. He was planning a future that didn't include my recovery. That sounds amazing, I said, taking a sip of wine that tasted like ash. I'm so proud of how hard you've worked for this. He reached across the table and took my hand. I know these past few weeks have been hard on both of us. The stress of your treatment, my work demands, everything feeling so uncertain. His thumb stroked across my knuckles in a gesture that once would have comforted me. But we're going to get through this together, I promise. Together. While he was buying jewelry for another woman with our money. Asher, can I ask you something? Of course, anything. Do you remember our wedding vows? His expression flickered, just for a second, with something that might have been panic. Of course I do. Why? I was thinking about them today during treatment, about the in sickness and in health part. I studied his face as I spoke. It's funny how you never really know what those words mean until you're tested. We're passing the test, he said quickly. Look at us, sharing dinner, talking about our future. This is what commitment looks like, but I was watching his eyes, and I could see the calculation behind them. He was performing the role of devoted husband while simultaneously planning my exit from his life. The sheer audacity of it was almost impressive. You're right, I agreed. This is exactly what commitment looks like. We ate in relative silence after that, Asher occasionally reaching over to touch my hand or brush hair away from my face, gestures of affection that felt like a choreographed routine. He told me more lies about his day, details about golf holes he'd never played, conversations with people who weren't there, celebrations of deals that had been made through adultery rather than athletics. Every lie he told made me stronger. After dinner, I excused myself for a bath, claiming the chemotherapy had left me achy and tired. Asher was immediately solicitous, running the water himself, adding lavender salts, dimming the lights. Take all the time you need, he said, kissing my forehead. I'll clean up dinner and check some emails. Just relax and focus on getting better. As I sank into the warm water, I finally allowed myself to process everything I'd learned. 3 wives, 14 mistresses, a pattern of targeting vulnerable women for financial gain, and now, potentially, something even more sinister. But for the first time since my diagnosis, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a predator who had finally found her prey. The woman soaking in that bathtub was planning something Asher Baltimore couldn't imagine, his complete and total destruction, orchestrated by the very women he'd underestimated and abandoned. He thought he was married to a sick, dependent wife who would be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he threw her way. He had no idea he was living with someone who was about to become his worst nightmare. Tomorrow, I would meet Kimberly Myers and begin the process of taking back everything he'd stolen. Not just from me, but from every woman he'd ever targeted. Tonight, I would lie next to him in our bed, listening to him breathe, knowing that each breath brought him closer to the moment when his carefully constructed world would collapse around him. And for the first time in months, that thought made me smile. The next morning, Asher left for work at his usual time, kissing my cheek and reminding me to rest. I've got back-to-back meetings all day, he said, adjusting his tie in our hallway mirror. But I'll try to check in around lunch. Call me if you need anything. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner before opening my laptop and diving deeper into the investigation Kendall and Kimberly had started. What I found in the next 3 hours would have destroyed a weaker version of myself. But the woman I was becoming, the woman who had started awakening in that conference room last night, absorbed each new revelation like armor. Sarah Chen's medical records, which Dr. Chen had provided with her sister-in-law's permission, painted a horrifying picture. Sarah's aneurysm had been treated successfully, but her recovery had been complicated by a series of accidents during her rehabilitation. Falls that shouldn't have happened, medications that went missing, a mysterious food poisoning incident that landed her back in the hospital just as she was regaining her cognitive function. Each incident had occurred when Asher was the only person present. Kimberly's file was even more damning. Her ovarian cancer treatment had been progressing well until the final months, when she'd experienced a series of setbacks that baffled her medical team. Severe reactions to medications she'd previously tolerated, infections that appeared despite careful monitoring, a sudden decline that nearly killed her just as her prognosis had been improving. The private investigator's notes included a detailed timeline cross-referencing each medical crisis with Asher's documented whereabouts and activities. The pattern was undeniable. Whenever his wives showed signs of recovery or independence, their conditions mysteriously worsened. At 11 a.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Elderly, impeccably dressed, carrying a large floral arrangement. I opened the door cautiously. "Mrs. Baltimore, I'm Eleanor Miranda from Miranda Estate Catering. I have a delivery for you." Miranda Estate, the same venue where Asher had married both Kimberly and me. "I think there's been a mistake. I didn't order anything." "Oh, it's not from you, dear. A young woman called this morning, said she was a friend from your work. She wanted to send something to help you feel better during your treatment." She handed me the arrangement, a stunning display of white roses and eucalyptus in a crystal vase. Tucked discreetly among the stems was a small envelope with my name written in the same elegant script I now recognized. "The young lady was very specific about the delivery time," Eleanor continued. "She said it was important that you receive this exactly at 11 a.m., and that I should mention the roses came from the memorial garden behind our chapel." Memorial garden. My blood chilled. "Did she give you her name?" "Kendall, I believe. Lovely girl. She said you'd understand the significance of the timing." After Eleanor left, I carried the arrangement to my kitchen and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. "Mira, by the time you read this, you'll have discovered the medical files. I know how overwhelming this must be, but you need to understand the urgency of our situation. Asher isn't just planning to leave you. He's planning to ensure you don't survive long enough to expose him. The roses are from Sarah Chen's memorial garden." Yes, memorial. Sarah didn't survive her recovery complications. She died 18 months ago from what the death certificate lists as heart failure secondary to medication interaction. Her family knew it wasn't natural, but they could never prove Asher's involvement. "We can't let that happen to you. Check your medication bottles right now. All of them. Look for anything that seems different. Color, texture, even the way the pills rattle in the container. Asher has been home alone with your medications for weeks. If you find anything suspicious, don't confront him. Don't change your routine. Act normal until we meet this afternoon. Your life depends on it. The memorial roses will serve as our signal. If you need immediate help before our meeting, place them in your front window. I'm watching. Stay alive, Mira. We're so close to ending this." I rushed to our bathroom where I kept my cancer medications, anti-nausea pills, pain medication, supplements my oncologist had prescribed. With shaking hands, I examined each bottle carefully. The anti-nausea medication looked wrong. The pills were the same color and shape, but they felt different, slightly grittier in texture, and they rattled differently in the bottle. I compared them to photos I'd taken when I first picked up the prescription, a habit I'd developed to track my medications. They weren't the same pills. I photographed everything with my phone, then used a magnifying glass from Asher's desk to examine the pills more closely. Under magnification, I could see tiny inconsistencies in the coating, subtle differences that suggested these weren't manufactured pharmaceuticals. Someone had replaced my medication with something else. My phone buzzed with a text from Asher. "How are you feeling? Remember to take your noon medications. Love you." He was reminding me to poison myself. The realization hit me like a physical blow. For weeks I'd been taking pills that Asher had tampered with, wondering why my side effects seemed worse than other patients, why my recovery was slower than expected. He hadn't just been emotionally abandoning me during my cancer treatment, he'd been actively sabotaging it. I thought about all the times he'd helpfully organized my medications, the way he'd always volunteered to pick up new prescriptions, his insistence on being the one to set up my weekly pill organizer. His concern had seemed touching at the time. Now I understood it had been attempted murder. I walked to our front window and moved the roses to the sill, then sat down to wait. Within minutes, my phone rang. An unknown number. "Mira, it's Kendall. I saw the signal. Are you hurt? Do you need immediate medical attention?" "I think he's been poisoning me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. My anti-nausea medication has been replaced with something else. Don't take anything else he's given you. Nothing. Can you get to the botanical gardens early? We need to move up our timeline. I'll be there in an hour. Mira, bring the tampered medications with you, and whatever you do, act normal when Asher comes home tonight. If he suspects we know what he's doing, he might escalate to something more direct. More direct. The phrase sent ice through my veins. As I gathered the evidence and prepared to leave, I caught sight of myself in our hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me was thin from chemotherapy, pale from weeks of being slowly poisoned, but her eyes were absolutely fierce. Asher Baltimore had made a critical error in judgment. He'd assumed that making me sick would make me weak. Instead, it had made me lethal. The Riverside Botanical Gardens were nearly empty on a Tuesday afternoon, just a few elderly couples wandering the paved paths and a maintenance worker pruning the late-season blooms. I found Kimberly Myers exactly where she'd promised to be, sitting on a wrought iron bench beside the rose maze, looking like she was simply enjoying a peaceful afternoon. In person, she was even more striking than her photograph had suggested. Auburn hair caught the sunlight as it fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and she wore a sage green dress that complemented her complexion perfectly. But it was her posture that caught my attention. The way she held herself with absolute confidence, like someone who had survived the worst thing imaginable and emerged stronger. "Mira," she said, standing as I approached. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were assessing, taking in my appearance with the careful attention of someone who understood exactly what chemotherapy did to a body. "Thank you for coming. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been poisoned by my husband for 6 weeks, I said, sitting beside her on the bench. Which, apparently, I have been. She nodded grimly. "Kendall told me about the medication. We suspected he might try that approach with you. It's his preferred method when wives start showing signs of recovery." I handed her the pill bottles I'd brought. I figured it out about 3 months before my treatment ended, when I started feeling worse instead of better despite what my doctors were telling me. She opened one of my pill bottles and examined the contents with the practiced eye of someone who'd been through this before. "These aren't anti-nausea medication. They're low-dose barbiturates mixed with something that mimics chemo side effects. Enough to keep you sick and disoriented. Not enough to kill you quickly. Why not just kill me quickly?" "Because sudden death raises questions. Grieving husbands get sympathy and life insurance payouts. Murdered wives get autopsies and criminal investigations." She sealed the bottle and handed it back to me. "Asher's much smarter than I gave him credit for when I married him." I studied her face, looking for signs of the trauma she'd endured. "How did you survive? How did you figure it out?" "My brother Sheldon saved my life," she said simply. "He's a construction contractor, not a medical professional, but he's also incredibly observant. He noticed that I only had severe symptoms after Asher had been alone with my medications. When I was staying at my parents' house, recovering from a particularly bad reaction, Sheldon took some of my pills to a friend who works in pharmaceutical testing and found they'd been tampered with, found they weren't what the labels claimed at all. That's when we started really investigating Asher's background." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. "This is Sarah Chen, Asher's first wife. She died thinking she was recovering from her aneurysm complications." The woman in the photo was Asian, petite, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. She looked like someone who would rescue stray cats and remember everyone's birthday. "She looks so young," I whispered. 28, she owned a graphic design company that specialized in healthcare marketing. Very successful, very profitable. After she died, Asher inherited everything because he'd convinced her to update her will while she was still cognitively impaired from her surgery. "The same surgery complications you said weren't natural. Sarah's sister-in-law, Dr. Chen, your oncologist, has been carrying guilt about Sarah's death for 2 years. She knew something was wrong but couldn't prove it. When Asher started bringing you to her practice, she immediately contacted me." I felt pieces clicking into place. Dr. Chen has been watching him. That's why she always asks so many questions about my home life, why she insists on seeing me alone sometimes. She's been documenting everything: his behavior, your symptoms, the timeline of your relationship. She's also been secretly monitoring your blood work for signs of poisoning. And you've been consistently showing elevated levels of compounds that shouldn't be in your system. Nothing that would kill you quickly, but everything designed to make your cancer treatment as difficult as possible. I thought about the past 6 weeks, the nausea that seemed worse than other patients experienced, the fatigue that left me barely functional, The way I'd felt like I was drowning in my own body while Asher complained about my neediness. He wanted me to suffer, I said. He wanted you dependent. Grateful for whatever scraps of attention he gave you. Too sick to ask questions about where he was or what he was doing with your money. Kimberly's voice carried his edge of steel. But he also wanted you to die slowly enough that no one would suspect anything other than cancer complications. How many women has he done this to? That we know of? 3. Sarah died. I survived because my family intervened. You're number 3. But you're not going to be his next victim. She pulled out a thick manila folder and handed it to me. This is everything we've compiled over the past 2 years. Financial records showing his pattern of targeting women with assets, medical records documenting suspicious complications in his wife's treatments, testimony from the private investigator we hired to track his movements. I opened the folder and felt my breath catch. It was a complete dossier on Asher Baltimore, criminal predator. Bank statements showing systematic theft from joint accounts. Hotel receipts documenting affairs that coincided with his wife's medical crises. Even photographs of him with various women, taken by the private investigator. We have enough evidence to put him in prison for the rest of his life, Kimberly said. The question is, do you want justice through the legal system, or do you want to destroy him the same way he tried to destroy us? I looked up from the files, meeting her gaze directly. What's the difference? Legal justice means he goes to prison, but his victims' families never get their money back. He's hidden assets, transferred properties, created shell companies. Even if he's convicted, most of what he stole is beyond recovery. And the other option means we take back everything he stole, expose him publicly so no other woman will ever trust him, and leave him with absolutely nothing except the knowledge that he was outsmarted by the very women he tried to kill. I thought about Sarah Chen, who died believing she was recovering. I thought about all the women who might come after me if Asher wasn't stopped permanently. I thought about the $35,000 missing from our account, and the jewelry he'd bought for Kendall with money I'd earned. Most of all, I thought about the pills he'd given me this morning, the text reminding me to poison myself, the way he'd kissed my forehead while actively planning my death. I want to destroy him, I said quietly. I want to take everything. Kimberly smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely happy. Then let me introduce you to the team that's going to help us do exactly that. 20 minutes later, we were joined by 3 other people who transformed our quiet garden meeting into something that felt like a war council. Sheldon Myers arrived first, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with the same intelligent eyes as his sister. Behind him came Dr. Sarah Chen, looking uncomfortable but determined, and finally a woman I didn't recognize who introduced herself as Detective Angela Miranda. Detective Miranda has been investigating Asher unofficially for 18 months, Kimberly explained as we gathered around a picnic table hidden behind the rose maze. Sarah Chen's family filed a complaint after her death, but there wasn't enough evidence for an official investigation. Detective Miranda, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, pulled out a tablet and opened what looked like a comprehensive case file. What we have now is a pattern that spans 7 years and crosses state lines. Asher Baltimore, who's used at least 3 different surnames by the way, has been systematically targeting and exploiting vulnerable women. 3 surnames, I asked. Baltimore is his current identity. Before that, he was Asher Chen when he married Sarah. Before Sarah, he was Asher Morrison when he married a woman named Lisa in North Carolina. My head spun. There's a 4th wife? Lisa Morrison died of complications from lupus treatment 3 years before Sarah. Her family suspected foul play but never had enough evidence to pursue it. She left behind a successful real estate business and a life insurance policy worth $800,000. Patients who should have been recovering experience sudden, unexplained setbacks, medication reactions that don't match their medical histories, secondary infections that appear despite careful monitoring. He's been perfecting his technique, Sheldon said bluntly, learning from each wife how to be more subtle, more careful, harder to detect. Detective Miranda swiped to a new screen showing a timeline. Here's what makes this case prosecutable. Asher's been getting sloppy. With Sarah, he waited until after her death to access her assets. With Kimberly, he tried to move money while she was still unconscious. But with you, Mira, he's been actively draining accounts and making major purchases while you're still very much alive and capable of testifying. She showed me bank records I hadn't seen before. Transfers from our savings account to investment accounts in Asher's name only, the mortgage on our house being refinanced without my signature, credit cards being opened using my information but with him listed as the primary holder. He's been preparing for your death since the week you were diagnosed, Dr. Chen said quietly. We have documentation showing he contacted a life insurance company about increasing your policy the same day you got your biopsy results. How much did he increase it to? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. $2 million, Detective Miranda replied. He told the insurance company you'd requested the increase because you were worried about medical bills bankrupting your family. The enormity of it hit me like a physical blow. Asher hadn't just been unfaithful or neglectful. He'd been planning my murder from the moment I got sick, calculating exactly how much my death would be worth to him. There's more, Kimberly said gently. Show her the Morrison and Associates information. Detective Miranda opened another file. Asher's affair with Kendall isn't just personal, it's professional insurance. She's been documenting his attempts to involve her in financial fraud. He's asked her to forge documents, to witness signatures on papers you've never seen, to provide false testimony about your mental state during treatment. My mental state? He's been building a case that your cancer treatment has left you cognitively impaired and unable to make sound financial decisions. He's planning to have you declared incompetent so he can take control of all your assets while you're still alive. Sheldon pulled out his own tablet, showing me photographs taken through telephoto lenses. Asher meeting with lawyers, signing documents at a bank, entering a building that housed several investment firms. He's been incredibly busy while you've been in chemotherapy, Sheldon said, setting up offshore accounts, transferring property, creating shell companies. He's building a financial fortress that would be almost impossible to penetrate after your death. Almost impossible, I repeated. The keyword being almost, Detective Miranda said with a slight smile, because we've been tracking every move he's made, every fraudulent document, every illegal transfer, every forged signature. We have evidence of mail fraud, identity theft, financial elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit murder. Dr. Chen leaned across the table. Murray, I need you to understand something. Asher isn't just planning to kill you quickly. He's planning to make it look like you suffered a prolonged decline due to cancer complications, possibly including a period of mental incapacity that would explain why you agreed to sign over your assets. He wants me to die slowly and publicly, I said, the full horror of it sinking in. So everyone will see him as a devoted husband who cared for his sick wife until the end. Exactly, and then he'll disappear with your money, probably moving to a new state with a new identity, ready to start the pattern over again with wife number 4. Kimberly reached across the table and took my hand. But here's what Asher doesn't know. We've been watching him longer than he's been watching you. We know about every account, every property, every investment, and more importantly, we have Kendall on the inside, documenting his plans in real time. Which brings us to the most important question, Detective Miranda said. Are you willing to wear a wire? Because we're going to get Asher to confess to everything, and we're going to make sure every stolen dollar finds its way back to his victims' families. I thought about Sarah Chen, dead at 28. I thought about Lisa Morrison, whose family never got justice. I thought about the pills in my bathroom cabinet and the text message reminding me to take them. I'll wear whatever you need me to wear, I said. When do we start? Sheldon grinned. Actually, we started 2 days ago. Tomorrow, Asher's going to receive some news that's going to make him very desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. What kind of news? The kind that makes him realize his carefully planned timeline just got moved up by about 6 months, Kimberly said. Hope you're ready to give the performance of your life, Mira. Because by this time tomorrow, Asher Baltimore is going to show you exactly who he really is. After the others left, Kimberly and I remained at the picnic table as the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the garden. She'd been quiet during the tactical planning, letting the detective and her brother handle the logistics, but now that we were alone, I could see she had something more personal to share. You need to understand what you're walking into, she said, her fingers tracing patterns on the weathered wood. Not just the legal aspects or the financial fraud, but what it's like to live with someone who's actively trying to kill you while pretending to love you. I waited, sensing this was a story she'd never told in full before. I met Asher at a charity auction 5 years ago. He was charming, successful, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Her voice carried the weight of someone looking back at their younger, more trusting self. He pursued me relentlessly. Flowers every day, surprise visits to my office, romantic dinners at places I'd mentioned wanting to try. I felt like the most important person in the world. When did things change? Gradually. Then all at once. First it was small suggestions about my business. Maybe I was working too hard. Maybe I should consider selling and focusing on being a wife. Then it was my friends. Subtle comments about how they didn't seem to really support our relationship. Before I knew it, my world had shrunk to just him. She paused, watching a maintenance worker tend to the roses nearby. The cancer diagnosis came during our second year of marriage. Ovarian, stage 3. Asher's initial reaction seemed perfect, concerned, supportive, ready to fight alongside me. He insisted on coming to every appointment, taking notes, asking questions. I thought I was lucky to have such a devoted husband, but he was gathering intelligence. Exactly. Learning my treatment schedule, understanding my medications, figuring out when I'd be most vulnerable. Kimberly's voice hardened. The first sign something was wrong came about 3 months into treatment. I was actually responding really well to chemotherapy, better than my doctors had expected. My tumor markers were dropping, my energy was returning, and I was starting to talk about going back to work part-time. That's when the complications started. That's when Asher started getting creative. My anti-nausea medication began making me sicker instead of better. I developed infections that seemed to come from nowhere. My blood counts would swing wildly for no apparent reason. She turned to face me directly. "Mira, I want you to understand something." I knew. Deep down, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't let myself believe my husband was poisoning me. The admission hung between us like a confession. "How did you finally accept it?" "I nearly died. Not from cancer, from what Asher later claimed was a medication interaction, but what we now know was a deliberate overdose of blood thinners mixed with my regular pills." Her hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen. "I hemorrhaged so severely that I needed emergency surgery. While I was unconscious in the ICU, Asher convinced my doctors that I'd become confused about my medications due to chemo brain and had accidentally overdosed myself. My stomach churned. They believed him? He was very convincing. Devoted husband, keeping careful track of his confused wife's medications, devastated by her near-death experience. The medical staff felt sorry for him. Kimberly's laugh was bitter. He even cried at my bedside. Real tears. I think part of him was genuinely upset that his plan had failed. "But your brother suspected?" Sheldon had been watching our marriage deteriorate for months. He saw how isolated I'd become, how Asher had gradually taken control of every aspect of my life. When I nearly died from a medication error, Sheldon started asking uncomfortable questions. She pulled out her phone and showed me a recording app. "This is from my hospital room, 2 days after the hemorrhage." Sheldon had hidden a recorder under my water pitcher. She pressed play, and I heard Asher's voice, younger but unmistakably him. "The doctors say she might not make it through the night. I've been thinking about arrangements. I know it's morbid, but we should be practical. The life insurance policy will cover everything, and her business is worth more than we thought." My blood ran cold. He was planning your funeral while you were fighting for your life. He was planning his windfall. But here's the thing, Mira, that recording saved my life in more ways than one. Not just because it proved what he was doing, but because it made me understand that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid, and I wasn't overreacting. "How did you survive after that?" "My family intervened. Sheldon hired private security, moved me to a different hospital, and made sure I was never alone with Asher again. We told him it was standard protocol for infection control, but really it was because we knew he'd try to finish what he started. And he tried? 3 more times, once with contaminated IV bags. We caught that because the security guard noticed Asher had been in my room alone just before my vitals crashed. Once with medications that weren't prescribed by my doctors. And once, she paused, taking a shaky breath. Once he tried to smother me with a pillow when he thought the night nurse was busy. The casual way she delivered that last detail made it somehow more horrifying. The security camera caught it. 2 minutes of my husband pressing a pillow over my face while I was too weak from treatment to fight back. When the nurse came in, he claimed he was just adjusting my pillows to make me more comfortable. That's when you knew you had to disappear. That's when I realized Asher Baltimore would never stop trying to kill me unless he believed he'd succeeded. So we faked my death. She smiled grimly. Officially, Kimberly Myers Baltimore died of cancer complications 6 months after her diagnosis. Unofficially, Kimberly Myers has been building a case against her husband ever since. He doesn't know you're alive. He doesn't know any of us are working together. As far as Asher knows, he's about to become a very wealthy widower for the third time. Her expression grew fierce. But what he doesn't realize is that his first two wives' families have been planning his destruction for years. We're not just going to stop him, Mira. We're going to make sure he loses everything, just like he tried to take everything from us. The sun was setting behind the garden walls, casting everything in golden light that made the moment feel surreal. Here I was, sitting with a woman who had legally died to escape my husband, planning his downfall while he thought I was home taking the poisoned pills he'd prepared for me. Tomorrow, Kimberly said, standing to leave, Asher's going to receive news that will panic him. When that happens, he's going to accelerate his timeline. Are you ready for him to show you who he really is? I thought about the man who had kissed my forehead this morning while reminding me to take medication he'd tampered with. The man who was buying jewelry for another woman with money he'd stolen from our joint account. The man who had killed at least one wife and tried to kill another. I'm ready, I said. Let's end this. I returned home that evening to find Asher preparing what looked like a romantic dinner. Candles flickered on our dining table, wine was breathing in crystal glasses, and he'd changed into the navy shirt I'd once told him brought out his eyes. The scene was perfect, except now I knew it was all performance. There's my beautiful wife, he said, embracing me with theatrical tenderness. How was your day? You look much better. I feel better, I said truthfully. Knowing the truth had lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I actually went for a walk in the botanical gardens. As he served dinner, I watched him with new eyes. Every gesture was calculated. He was playing devoted husband while counting down the days until my death would make him rich. Asher, I've been thinking about our future, about what happens after my treatment is over. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? I'm going to beat this cancer. I want to start planning for when I'm healthy again. Something flickered behind his eyes. Disappointment. He recovered quickly, but I'd seen it. I was thinking we should update our wills, and maybe look into some investments. The Myers account has been going well. Maybe we could put money into Sheldon's construction projects. Asher's demeanor shifted subtly. His smile became tighter. Let's not talk about business tonight. You should focus on getting well first. But I am getting well. Take over some account management when I'm feeling stronger. Mira. His voice carried a warning edge I'd never heard before. You're still recovering. Major financial decisions should wait. My phone buzzed with a text from Kendall. Emergency meeting moved to tonight. Check your email immediately. Act normal. Who's texting so late? Asher asked sharply. Dr. Chen's office. Something about my appointment schedule. I stood up. I should check my email quickly. In our home office, I found an urgent message from Detective Miranda. Asher received notification today that he's being investigated for insurance fraud. His reaction was immediate and extreme. We believe he's going to attempt to accelerate his timeline with you. You are in immediate danger. Do not consume anything he prepares. Act natural tonight, but be ready to leave at a moment's notice. My heart pounded as I deleted the email and returned to dinner. Everything okay? He asked, watching me intently. Fine, just routine appointment confirmation. I picked up my fork, though eating anything he'd prepared made me nauseous. This pasta is delicious. I'm glad you like it. He refilled my wine glass carefully. You know, I was thinking about what you said earlier, about planning ahead. Yes, maybe you're right. Maybe we should update some paperwork. His smile was warm, but his eyes were winter cold. There's actually something I've been meaning to discuss with you. He pulled out his phone, showing me a power of attorney document with my name already filled in, granting him complete control over all financial decisions. When did you prepare this? I asked. Just today. We should get it notarized while you're still feeling well enough to sign. While I'm still alive enough to sign, he meant. The mask was finally slipping, and underneath was something truly terrifying. The tension in our dining room was suffocating. Asher sat across from me, his pleasant mask abandoned, waiting for me to sign documents that would give him legal control over my life and death. What he didn't know was that I was wearing a wire, that Detective Miranda was listening from a van nearby, and that everything was being recorded. I don't understand the urgency, I said, keeping my voice level. These are important legal documents. I should sleep on it. Mira, his voice carried barely controlled fury. You're not thinking clearly. The medication, the stress, it's affecting your judgment. That's exactly why we need to handle this now, while you're still lucid. There it was, his plan laid out explicitly. He would claim I'd signed over power of attorney while mentally competent, then argue that my subsequent decline proved how necessary it had been. "What medication?" I asked innocently. "You've been having confusion lately, forgetting conversations, mixing up appointments." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through fabricated notes. "Last week you forgot we were supposed to meet for lunch. Yesterday you asked me the same question 3 times. Every item was fabricated, but he presented it with confidence, evidence he planned to use to prove my incompetence. What happens if I don't sign tonight?" I asked. "Mira, you're not understanding the time sensitivity here." His voice grew sharper, more desperate. "The financial planner was very clear that these protections need to be in place immediately." "Why? What's happening immediately?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing he'd trapped himself. There was no legitimate reason for the urgency, except that he was planning to kill me soon. My phone buzzed. "Get out now. He's not alone in the house." "Not alone." I looked at Asher, who was watching me with barely concealed fury. "Who's here?" I asked quietly. "What? Who else is in our house, Asher?" His face went white. "No one." "What are you talking about?" But I heard it, a soft creak from upstairs, someone moving carefully across our bedroom floor. "There's someone upstairs. Sit down, Mira." His voice was sharp now, all pretense gone. "You're being paranoid." I moved toward the stairs, but Asher positioned himself between me and the staircase. For the first time in our marriage, I saw him as a physical threat. I said, "Sit down." "No." I backed toward our front door. "I want to know who's in our house." Another sound from upstairs, a drawer opening and closing. "Mira, listen carefully." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You're going to sit down, sign those papers, and take your evening medication." He pulled a small bottle from his pocket containing 2 brownish pills, unlike any medication I'd ever seen. "What are those?" "Something to help you sleep better." "Something to help me sleep forever." "I'm not taking mystery pills." "You're taking them, or I'm going to assume your cognitive decline has progressed to where you can't make rational decisions." I heard car doors slamming outside. Multiple doors. Asher's face went from threatening to panicked. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I survived you," I said. "Just like Kimberly did." "Police! Open the door!" As the front door burst open, I realized Asher Baltimore had finally met a victim stronger than his ability to destroy her. The next few hours passed in a blur of flashing lights, handcuffs, and the systematic dismantling of Asher's facade. I found myself in the back of an ambulance, watching my husband being read his rights in our driveway. "Mrs. Baltimore?" A paramedic checked my vitals. "How are you feeling?" "Fine," I said, though fine felt inadequate for someone who'd just discovered her husband had been systematically poisoning her while planning her murder. Detective Miranda appeared at the ambulance doors. "Mira, we need to get you to the hospital for blood work to document what he's been giving you." "What about the person upstairs?" "Luke Morrison. He's been working with Asher for 6 months, helping set up the financial infrastructure for your murder." Her expression darkened. "He was supposed to escalate things tonight if you didn't cooperate." "He was going to kill me tonight." "We think so." Luke had a syringe filled with massive doses of insulin, enough to cause fatal hypoglycemia, especially in someone weakened by chemotherapy. If Detective Miranda's team hadn't intervened, I would have died tonight, and it would have looked like a tragic cancer complication. "How did you know to come when you did?" Kendall was monitoring through the wire. When she heard Asher mention evening medication and Luke moving upstairs, she called us in. Detective Miranda helped me from the ambulance. "Speaking of which, there's someone who's been waiting to meet you properly." She led me to a black sedan where Kendall Myers stepped out. Even more striking in person, tall, blonde, with effortless elegance, but her eyes held predatory intelligence. "Mira," she said, extending her hand, "I'm sorry we had to meet under these circumstances, but I'm glad you're safe." "You've been sleeping with my husband," I said bluntly. "I've been gathering evidence against your husband," she corrected. The sleeping part was unfortunately necessary to maintain cover, but every encounter was documented, every conversation recorded, all in service of building the case that's going to put him away forever. I studied her face, finding only steely determination. "How long have you been planning this?" 2 years, ever since my sister survived his attempt to murder her. Kendall opened her laptop on the sedan's hood. "Let me show you what we've accomplished." The screen displayed a comprehensive database, financial records, medical documents, recorded conversations, photographs, timelines stretching back 7 years. "This is everything, every crime he's committed, every woman he's targeted, every dollar he's stolen. Detective Miranda pointed to specific entries. Luke Morrison's involvement was the missing piece. He's been Asher's partner in at least 3 murders. 3 murders: Lisa Morrison in North Carolina, Sarah Chen here in Charleston, and Rebecca Torres in Georgia. Luke confessed to everything once he realized we had him. The scope was staggering. This wasn't just one man targeting vulnerable women, it was an organized criminal enterprise operating for over a decade. You're the first victim who had enough warning to help us catch them in the act, Kendall said. Because of Kimberly, because of all of us working together, and because you were smart and strong enough to play along when we needed you to. Standing on my front lawn, surrounded by women who'd risked everything to save me, I realized something profound had happened. I wasn't just surviving cancer anymore. I was surviving the man who'd tried to use my cancer to kill me, and I was going to do more than survive. I was going to thrive. 2 hours later, after blood draws and medical examinations at Charleston General Hospital, I found myself in a private conference room with Kendall, finally ready to hear the full story of how she'd infiltrated Asher's life and turned his own tactics against him. The hardest part wasn't gaining his trust, Kendall said, settling into a chair across from me. It was pretending to be the kind of woman he targets. Asher has a very specific type: successful but vulnerable, independent but craving approval. I had to become someone he'd see as both an opportunity and a challenge. How did you study him? For months before I ever spoke to him, we knew from Kimberly's experience that he frequented Morrison & Associates networking events, so I got myself hired there specifically to access those circles. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos taken with telephoto lenses. We documented his behavior at social functions, identified the women he approached, analyzed his conversation patterns. The photos showed Asher at various company events, always gravitating toward the same type of woman: blonde, professional, standing slightly apart from the main group. He had a hunting pattern as predictable as any predator. His approach was remarkably consistent, Kendall continued. He'd position himself near the bar or appetizer table, wait for women to approach those areas alone, then initiate contact with some variation of "I haven't seen you at these events before." It worked because it made women feel noticed and special. And you let him think he was seducing you. I let him think he was discovering me. There's a difference. Her smile was sharp. Asher's ego requires him to feel like he's uncovering hidden treasure. So I played the role of a successful attorney who was new to town, slightly overwhelmed by Charleston's social scene, grateful for guidance from someone established. The Myers Construction connection wasn't accidental. Nothing was accidental. We chose that surname specifically because we knew it would intrigue him. When he learned I was supposedly related to his biggest client, his interest shifted from personal to professional. She scrolled through more photos on her phone. Every date we had was carefully orchestrated to gather specific information. What kind of information? His financial strategies, his timeline for your murder, his methods for avoiding detection. Kendall's expression grew darker, but most importantly, his plans for disposing of evidence and establishing alibis. She showed me transcripts of conversations that made my blood run cold. Asher discussing the best ways to simulate medication errors. Luke Morrison providing details about how they'd covered their tracks in previous murders, references to a clean-out protocol they'd perfected over years of practice. He told you all of this while thinking you were his accomplice. He told me because he thought I was falling in love with him and would soon become his next wife. In his mind, I was going to be wife number 4, which meant I needed to understand how he operated. Kendall's voice carried disgust. He actually seemed proud of his efficiency. He bragged about how he'd refined his techniques with each victim. And you recorded everything: dinner conversations, pillow talk, planning sessions. We have hours of audio evidence of Asher Baltimore describing exactly how he murdered 3 women and attempted to murder Kimberly. The scope of the evidence was overwhelming. For 2 years, while I'd been falling in love and planning a future with Asher, Kendall had been systematically documenting his past crimes and preventing his future ones. Tomorrow, she said, we start the process of taking back everything he stole. The next morning, I woke up in a guest room at Kimberly's townhouse, disoriented for a moment before remembering that my entire life had changed overnight. Through the window, I could see Detective Miranda's car still parked outside, protection while Asher's associates were being rounded up and the investigation expanded. By 9 a.m., Kimberly's dining room had been transformed into a command center. Laptops covered the antique oak table, documents were organized in precise stacks, and a whiteboard displayed a complex flowchart of Asher's criminal network. But what struck me most was the collection of women gathered around that table, all survivors, all fighters, all united by the man who had tried to destroy them. "Ladies," Detective Miranda said, calling the meeting to order, "let me introduce you to the full scope of what we've accomplished." She clicked a remote, and a projector displayed the first slide, the Baltimore Morrison Criminal Enterprise, a 7-year investigation. "Sarah Chen Torres," she continued, and a photograph appeared of the young woman I'd seen before. "Murdered 2019, North Carolina. Left behind a graphic design business worth $400,000 and life insurance totaling $600,000. Rebecca Torres," another photo. "Murdered 2021, Georgia. Owned a successful bakery chain. Total assets stolen, $1.2 million. Lisa Morrison," a third photo. "Murdered 2020, South Carolina. Real estate broker. Assets stolen, $800,000. And Kimberly Myers, Baltimore." Kimberly's own photo appeared, looking younger and healthier. "Attempted murder 2022. Construction heiress. Target assets, $2.4 million. Finally, my own photo appeared on the screen. "Mira, Baltimore. Current target. Marketing executive. Target assets, $3,500 plus life insurance of $2 million. The numbers were staggering, nearly $6 million stolen or targeted across 5 women. "But here's what Asher doesn't know," Kendall said, taking over the presentation. "Every asset he thinks he's stolen or hidden has been tracked, frozen, and is now subject to federal seizure." New slides showed bank accounts, property deeds, investment portfolios, and shell companies, all flagged for criminal activity. The offshore accounts Luke helped him establish. Detective Miranda smiled grimly. "We've been monitoring them for 18 months. Every transfer, every deposit, every withdrawal is documented evidence of money laundering and conspiracy." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "What about the medical evidence? Toxicology reports from Mira's blood work confirmed our suspicions," Nancy answered. "Barbiturates, anticoagulants, and synthetic compounds designed to mimic chemotherapy side effects, enough to significantly impair recovery, but not enough to cause immediate death. The same cocktail we found in Kimberly's system 2 years ago," Dr. Chen added. "And the same compounds that showed up in Sarah's post-mortem toxicology, though her family didn't understand the significance at the time." I stared at the evidence surrounding me. Years of meticulous investigation, documentation, and planning. How many people were involved in building this case? 12 investigators across 4 states, Detective Miranda replied, but it started with just one person who refused to believe her sister's death was natural. She gestured to a woman I hadn't met yet, petite, Asian, with fierce eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "Mira, meet Dr. Lisa Chen, Sarah's sister, and the person who first suspected Asher was murdering his wives." Dr. Lisa Chen stood and walked to the whiteboard, picking up a marker. 2 years ago, I made a promise to my sister. I told her I'd make sure the man who killed her never hurt another woman. She drew a line connecting all the photos to a single point labeled justice. Today, we keep that promise. 3 days later, I sat across from Asher in the Charleston County Detention Center, separated by reinforced glass and speaking through a telephone that recorded every word. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his expensive suits and carefully styled confidence. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. "Mira," he said, his voice carrying a desperate edge I'd never heard before. "Thank God you came. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. I need you to call my lawyer, transfer some money for bail. I can explain everything." I studied his face, looking for any trace of the man I'd fallen in love with. Instead, I saw a stranger, a predator, who'd worn the mask of my husband so convincingly that I'd never suspected the monster underneath. "I'm not here to help you, Asher. I'm here to tell you that I know everything." His expression flickered. Confusion, then calculation, then the first hint of real fear. "Know what? Mira, whatever they've told you. I know about Sarah Chen. I know about Rebecca Torres. I know about Lisa Morrison." I watched his face grow paler with each name. "I know about Kimberly, who isn't dead like you thought, and I know exactly what you plan to do to me." The phone trembled in his hand. "I know you've been poisoning me for 6 weeks. I know you increased my life insurance policy the day I was diagnosed. I know you've been draining our bank accounts and setting up offshore investments. My voice remained steady, clinical. I know you hired Luke Morrison to kill me Tuesday night if I didn't sign those power of attorney papers. Asher's mask finally cracked completely. The charming, concerned husband disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating that made me grateful for the reinforced glass between us. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly. Do you think this ends with me? Do you think I'm the only one involved in this? Actually, we arrested your entire network 3 days ago. Luke Morrison, Art Sheldon from the financial planning office, even your contact at the insurance company who helped you manipulate the policies. I leaned forward. It's over, Asher, all of it. You stupid bitch. His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You think you're some kind of hero. You think you've won something. I think I survived you. And more importantly, I think I'm going to make sure no other woman ever has to. He slammed his hand against the glass, making me jump despite myself. You were supposed to die grateful. You were supposed to think I loved you right up until the end. I did think you loved me. That's what made you so dangerous. I gave you 3 good years. I married you. I provided for you. I played the devoted husband perfectly. And this is how you repay me. You played a role to steal my money and then kill me. That's not love, Asher. That's premeditated murder. Prove it, he snarled. I reached into my purse and pulled out a tablet, opening to the first page of evidence Kendall and Detective Miranda had compiled. We already have. The screen showed bank records, recorded conversations, medical evidence, and timeline analyses spanning 7 years. Asher's face went white as he realized the scope of what we'd assembled. 2 years, Asher. We've been building this case for 2 years, ever since Kimberly survived your attempt to kill her. Every crime you committed, every woman you targeted, every dollar you stole, we documented all of it. That's impossible. Kendall Myers says hello, by the way. She wanted me to thank you for being so thorough in your confessions. Apparently you're very proud of your work when you think you're talking to an admirer. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Kendall was working with you? Kendall was working against you. So was her sister Kimberly. So was Dr. Chen. So was Nancy at the cancer center. So were the families of every woman you murdered. I stood up, preparing to leave. You're not a criminal mastermind, Asher. You're just a serial killer who finally met women smarter than you are. He was screaming something as I walked away, but I didn't look back to see what. For the first time in months, his voice had no power over me. I was free. 6 weeks later, I stood in the conference room of Morrison & Associates, watching Detective Miranda present the final asset recovery report to the families of Asher's victims. The mahogany table was covered with documents representing the complete dismantling of a criminal enterprise that had operated for 7 years. Total recovered assets, $5.8 million, Detective Miranda announced, her voice carrying satisfaction. This includes liquidated offshore accounts, seized properties, recovered investments, and life insurance settlements that were fraudulently obtained. Sarah Chen's family sat at one end of the table, her parents, her sister, Dr. Lisa Chen, and her young nephew who would now receive the college funds Sarah had established before her murder. They listened quietly as Detective Miranda explained how Sarah's graphic design business, which Asher had stolen and sold, would be rebuilt using recovered funds. Rebecca Torres's children, now teenagers being raised by their grandmother, would receive their mother's bakery money that had been hidden in shell companies. Lisa Morrison's elderly parents would finally have access to their daughter's real estate investments that Asher had transferred to fake corporations. Mrs. Baltimore. Detective Miranda turned to me. Your personal recovery totals $347,000 from joint accounts, plus the house deed which has been transferred back to your name only, plus your restored life insurance policy in the original amount. I nodded, but the money felt almost irrelevant compared to what we'd really accomplished. Kimberly Myers sat beside me, healthy and vibrant, her auburn hair catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, and the Myers construction contracts that Asher fraudulently negotiated. Voided and renegotiated with your family's company directly. Asher never had legitimate authority to represent your business interests. Sheldon Myers smiled grimly, meaning he loses the income stream that funded his lifestyle while he was planning Mira's murder. What about the other associates? Dr. Lisa Chen asked. Luke Morrison received life without parole for 3 counts of first-degree murder. Art Sheldon from the financial planning firm received 25 years for conspiracy and money laundering. The insurance contact received 15 years for fraud. And Asher? Detective Miranda's expression grew satisfied. Asher Baltimore was sentenced yesterday to life without parole on 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and 17 counts of financial fraud. He'll die in prison. The room fell silent as we absorbed the finality of it. After 7 years of terrorizing vulnerable women, Asher Baltimore's career as a serial killer was over. "There's one more thing," Kendall said, standing at the head of the table. "We've established a foundation using a portion of the recovered funds. The Sarah Chen Torres Foundation will provide legal and financial support to women who suspect they're being targeted by predatory partners. So other women won't have to fight alone," I said. "So other women will have an army behind them," Kimberly corrected. "We'd done more than survive Asher Baltimore. We'd created a legacy that would protect countless other women from men like him." Justice had never felt so complete. 1 year later, I sat in Dr. Chen's office receiving the words I'd fought so hard to hear. "Your latest scans are completely clear, Mira. You've officially beaten cancer." The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd survived both the disease that tried to kill me and the husband who'd actively tried to help it succeed. But as I walked out of the oncology center that had become my second home, I realized survival was only the beginning of my story. My house, now legally mine alone, had been transformed into something that actually felt like home. Gone were Asher's sterile decorating choices, replaced with warmth, color, and photographs of the women who'd saved my life. Kimberly and I had dinner together every Sunday. Kendall had become the sister I'd never had. Dr. Chen checked on me monthly, not just as my physician but as my friend. The Sarah Chen Torres Foundation had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. In 12 months, we'd helped 43 women escape dangerous relationships, provided legal support for 18 domestic violence cases, and created a network of resources that spanned 3 states. But perhaps most importantly, we'd proven something that Asher Baltimore had never understood. Women who support each other are unbreakable. 3 months ago, I'd started dating again, carefully, with full background checks and the protective oversight of my found family. His name was Marcus. He was a pediatric nurse at the children's hospital, and he thought my scars from chemotherapy were beautiful because they proved how strong I was. Most evenings I sat in my garden, the one I'd planted myself, with roses that bloomed because I tended them, not because they were part of someone else's performance. I was alive. I was healthy. I was surrounded by love that was real. Asher Baltimore had tried to write the ending to my story. Instead, I'd written the beginning of a life he could never have imagined, one where the women he'd underestimated had become the architects of his destruction and the guardians of each other's futures. I'd beaten cancer, and I'd beaten him at his own game. The best revenge, it turned out, was a life lived fully and fearlessly, surrounded by women who refused to let each other fight alone. He'd wanted me to die grateful for his fake love. Instead, I was living grateful for their real friendship, and that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.